Hey there, it's Philip Dunn from philipdunngallery.com. The link to my art website is down in the description below. Thanks for joining me. I am just an average guy that happens to be an artist, a painter. I do mostly oil on canvas, but I also do sketches and so forth. And this is just a YouTube video about movies that I find highly compelling, very interesting. So this is my little take on Dream State, the movie from 2023 with Nicolas Cage. Dreamy confusion or an awakening from the nightmare of society. The movie, oh, sorry, I called it Dreamscape. The movie is called Dream Scenario. It's about the ego and the collective unconscious. Another word for collective unconscious might be consensual reality, right? But consensual reality and the ego, these are two things that an awakened individual might want to potentially avoid. But Dream Scenario is a masterpiece about destroying the ego and awakening from the nightmare dream state that is society. At least for me, that's the deal with this movie. And it's fantastic. I can't recommend it more. Funny and intriguing and philosophically deep. There are layers and layers of brilliance to this movie and Easter eggs throughout the whole thing. I'm guessing it's going to be one of those timeless kind of mind bender movies. I'd put it in the category of After Hours by Martin Scorsese, The Matrix, Out of Breath, Boot to Soup, The Breathless to Americans, that movie, Palm Springs more recently, and The Menu. All of those are just a few that come to mind that kind of hit hard on a intelligence and philosophical level and really get to the core of this kind of awakening and nightmare society paradigm that just works so well with heavy thinker movie makers. The ego in this movie dream scenario has to be eliminated. Then you can either wake up within the dream state or from the dream itself entirely. Paul, the protagonist, he's forced into a nightmare because of what others think of him. So, for starters, what does Paul think of himself? His ego thinks he should be respected, a published academic. That's his starting character. And his colleague comes in and she strips that away. He's really powerless and full of lies about his identity. His fantasy is that he's a famous or important academic with a theory that's original to him, but it's an empty hope because he hasn't written any of it down. And the ideas, I guess, were his, but he didn't really claim it or publish it. Who knows if they were even his? It's all derivative, right? Academics, art. So ants, bees, zebras, all kinds of biologists study these animal behaviors. And his colleague published before he did, or before he could, or before he would, and the initial hook to his problem. And then Paul starts to appear in the dreams of others. So what does that mean? Meaning wise, he exists in some important way. He's validated because he exists in the minds of others. That's what we're born into, right? To the others, like the marketing team later in the movie or the PR company that takes him on, that amounts to fame and an opportunity to make money. Not necessarily what Paul wants, but Paul is more interested in the opportunity of being validated that he's dedicated his ego to, which is academia. With this newfound talent or whatever the heck it is, being in people's dreams, he can be maybe published, a respected author. He gets invited to dinner parties at the right places with friends and philosophers and thinkers. That's what his ego rationalizes, that he can get in on that world. He'll become himself by being some role or some character associated with his role in the eyes of the other characters. So he's allowing the perceptions of others, the collective others, the consensual reality, the minds of the unknowns to define who he is. And he gives them the power to define him or define his character. And who is he in those original dreams? He's someone who stands by and does nothing while the others have pressing issues in their dreams. He's not a participant in their dreams or their dream activities. I mean, he's a participant in the dreams, but not quite the drama of the dream. He's basically like an NPC and free guy. that Ryan Reynolds movie. So as his emotions and his feelings kick in to this problem of being in other people's dreams, his dreamscapes are similarly colored. His anger and his frustration turn into a villain character. He has envy, pride, greed, wrath, lust, sloth, and gluttony. He doesn't want to be associated with this Sprite consumer brand. He's too prideful for that. He envies the woman who he thinks stole his idea. Wrath ensues during the midway point when he gets loser sprayed on his car. And um, then as he follows the temptation of the young siren, Molly of the PR marketing agency, he displays lust. And part of that lust is his fame could become a sexual realization. But if you've seen the movie, he blows his wad, and there's a great scene around that. Yeah. He becomes despicable and incapable. He can't even please the fantasy woman character that's come into his dream. His body betrays him in real life. And he tries to explain that away like some kind of academic scientist biologist. He is just a grotesque human within a dream. It's like Inception, that Christopher Nolan movie. And then, so the movie moves from there to this bar in New York City that has people in costume. We can only assume too that Molly, who's there with him, she's in costume as a fronting, phony agency lady. And she does, in fact, maintain that the agency is like a cult. And only a thinker, academic like Paul could see through that bullshit. Again, she's appealing to his ego, and he just like hook, line, and sinker takes it. Oh, and aside here to this movie that I like, that is just a little tidbit that Martin Scorsese's After Hours, there's a character named Paul in that as well, the main character. He's manipulated by women in general, or the 5 or 6 women that are antagonists in the movie. Paul, in this movie, in dream scenario, the colleague woman steals his idea, or so he perceives. He's manipulated by her in a way. And the siren, Molly, in the bar, she tries to convince him to go with this idea of doing the Sprite sponsorship. So all along the way, he's having trouble with all these women. A few things to note in Act 2 of the movie. When Molly tells him about her sexual fantasy in her dream, Paul replies, "We don't get to decide what happens in dreams, do we?" And then she orders that dry martini. There's some kind of surrender going on here, and that develops as the movie goes on. It's also Halloween in that scene with the bar, and there's a guy dressed as Paul, totally meta. There's a couple dressed as skeletons that record him with their camera phones. They look like Day of the Dead characters. So the inclination for me there was that this is about ego death and the kind of surrender that's going to have to happen to Paul as he goes forward. I want to get back to think of how intelligence, that's just a phrase from the movie or a word from the movie that's made up. Intelligence and beehives and zebras and herds, they communicate as a group story, a group unconscious, that consensual reality that I'm talking about. They share behavior and dreams like the professor and all of those in his life. That's like the herding. His behavior affects others in dreams and out of dreams. To me, like visually, I kind of wish, I don't know if they had it in the movie, but herd that kind of flinches when one of the animals senses danger, like a zebra in a herd, or one of the bees communicates to the whole hive of bees, or the cloud of bees flying by, or this, you see this with schools of fish as well. One will flinch on one side and the entire bait ball school of fish will completely readapt and move according to the threat that's happening, or I guess birds do it too, and big giant flocks of birds. Moving on to the climax of the movie, Paul's self attempts to kill his own ego. And I think this is the core brilliance of the movie. Paul takes the final killing arrow in his dream to his throat, to his voice, to his words, to his thinking. It's his mental intellect, his person as academic. He's on stage. It's no accident that the directors chose this. He's on stage and there's this huge audience watching. It's just great because it feels like a dream. It is a dream, right? But So great. He takes that arrow, which the arrow reminds me of the arrow in Palm Springs, that movie with Andy Samberg, which is so cool as well. But it's a groundhog format movie. But the arrow and the killing of the self is super cool. And in this movie, it's just stunning the way they do it. Oh, and in another play, which on another stage is his daughter's play, another dream in real life in the movie. And this kind of imposes the exile on Paul. It continues the humiliation of his ego. And then we get to Paul's apology. He says he speaks from lived experience, but he's talking about a man who looks like him killing himself in his own dream. How is that lived experience? He's vilified because people imagine he's done things. Does that mean that imagination is what counts? Does the collective imagination, is that what counts? This shared YouTube reality where there's agreement amongst everyone that he's horrible. Does that matter to the man who studies zebras that blend in? It's such a good movie. So Paul has to be the zebra that blends in if he wants to clear his ego or have his ego make good with the herd. His wife calls it insincere and self-serving when he does that whole apology thing. And his daughter says she's going to have to kill herself. Or maybe what if Paul just needs to leave the herd entirely, right? And what is that, right? In the scope of philosophy, leaving the herd entirely has a lot to do with waking up, opening your eyes, abre los ojos. So some of that, and for sure, when the metaphors for light come in, that eyes open metaphor and the leaving of the herd is definitely working in parallel. So remember earlier on in the movie, his wife turned out the light and he couldn't see. He took off his glasses and he couldn't find the lamp. There's no visual clarity. In the basement of the dean's house, also, he can't find the light switch, which means he can't go into dreamland or sleep. The light keeps him awakened. He tries to block out the light with his hand, his self character, and then down the line, those fluorescent or artificial lights in France hit him in the head and cut him. When he goes to the play, also note this, he's not Paul Matthews. He has to shed his character, his name, his ego. And that's a simple denial at the front desk with the woman who's checking him in. And let's see that master of arts teacher, she cuts her hand as he tries to get through the door. Respect our boundaries, she said. This is like the boundaries between the dream state and the dreamer, maybe. And remember, in that scene where his daughter's on stage and he wants to see the play, she's a white rabbit, a cool nod to Alice in Wonderland, just like the tattoo in the Matrix movie. From there, the dream state itself, the PR company is the nightmare. They take the idea of collective consciousness, dream visitation, and they monetize it. That's all I'll say about that. So Paul is not dreamed of anymore. And then the house he gets when he gets divorced or separated, it smells of animals. Maybe that's another nod to the herd. The real estate agent acts out a scene of strangulation, which remember somebody was strangled earlier in one of the dreams. And then Paul is worried that he's being replaced by Chris. And he starts to get to this point where why can't the awakened man, the man with his eyes open, go back to his old life? Why can't the awakened man the guy who is finally seeing some clarity, why can't he go back to his old house and his old wife? To me, I like it because it's a parallel idea to that movie Castaway with Tom Hanks, where the cast is away and he's alone and he has to understand what the world is on his own. And then when he does get rescued, he can't quite reintegrate with society. So I think those two movies this movie and that one are parallel in that way, and that Paul wants to have what he used to have, but it's too late. He's opened his eyes. He's seen what's going on in this dream and this consensual reality and this collective unconscious. And he can't get back to the old story that he had, which was his cookie cutter family. Of note, The bookstore in France is called Rue Morgue or Morgue Street. That's super cool. So some kind of ego death has occurred by the time Paul gets to France, and some kind of surrender is in progress. He embraces his role as Freddy Krueger. He wears the hand knife costume prop for the photo shoot. Um, it seems like he still wants fame for the book, but the book is released in a basement. It's a thin paperback. It's short in length. It's called I Am Your Nightmare. It's just freaking great. It was supposed to be Dream Scenario, the name of the movie. And that title, I Am Your Nightmare, works much better for the horror film demographic and the way society has ingested Paul as a, or at least the French, right? They got onto it and thought, oh, this is cool. It's kitschy. It's a horror guy. It works good. It works well for those nightmare dreamers. And for Paul, it's a matter of him either crafting a negative nightmare, the nightmare book, or a positive dream out of his experience. He's ultimately the dreamer. He's the I am in philosophical parlance, the one observing the acts of life. And so Paul accepts the book and he's sighting in. It's funny, he's clubbed by the light of ultimate clarity, or at least that's what I think that symbology is about. He gains a purpose or a singular intent. He wants a connection with his wife's dream. He wants to bond to somebody else. And apparently his wife accepts his presence and he enters her dream. She's this damsel in distress in a ring of fire, and he's made larger by these shoulder padded blazer. He's a man of bigger character, but in a costume, no less. Like the Halloween things earlier. And this is the funny talking heads. David Byrne, this is not my beautiful wife. This is not my beautiful house. He's got the whole thing. And that's a throwback to what he was talking about earlier with his wife. So letting the days go by, he becomes that David Byrne character. In the end, Paul wishes the dream was real. In fact, the ring of fire, him uniting with his wife, the shoulder pads, the very dreaminess of it, but he wishes the dream. He goes upwards and the screen fades to black. He wishes life were real, but it's merrily, it's just a dream. Life is but a dream. And that's my take on that movie. Please follow the link in the description and subscribe to this channel. I'll be doing more videos of movie breakdowns. And I'd call that just a movie breakdown. It's not a review. I love this movie, and I don't love a lot of movies, but I'm just an average guy. I'm a painter. A lot of this movie and others that are in my batch of favorites inform the artwork. So I'll share some stills in this actual video production too of some of my artwork, and you'll see the dreamscape influence or the dream scenario influence in some of the paintings that I've done. Anyway, thanks for watching. Take care. Peace.